Here we go. All right, thanks so much for coming to spend some time with me this morning. Hopefully you're all caffeinated and ready. So my name is Darius. I'm not actually the fourth, so I'm not that fancy, but I like the way it looks. And mostly my friends call me Bubs, so now you are all more than welcome to. Slide. Okay. First, before I get started, I just want to say thanks. Thanks to Drew for inviting me, and thank you guys all for being here. Often I think the conferences that add the most value are the one that you can go away from saying, I met a super cool person there, and you have a friendship that comes from it. And this feels like the kind of event where you actually get to spend time with people and get to know them. So I really appreciate you guys all being here again and giving me some time. I'm going to tell my story, but I kind of wanted to tell it through this lens because this is a designer maker conference of just, design something, make anything. Blank canvases are often the most intimidating. It's the hardest thing often to get started. But I would just encourage you to go get started because you never know where that journey will take you. I made a color website where people could name colors, and that was a big part of my journey. So if simple ideas seem silly, again, go get started because you never know where it'll go. I've been doing this kind of for 10 years, which seems like a very long time in internet years. I started a website called COLOURLOVERS 10 years ago, which was largely about people naming colors and then creating and sharing color palettes, which became a utility for creatives. And then about a year and a half ago, I started Creative Market, which was an extension of COLOURLOVERS, but it's a marketplace for designers to buy and sell the creative assets that they need for their projects. I've also seen sort of the world of building creative projects from a couple lenses. I bootstrapped for a long time. I grew the company through organic revenue, and then I've also raised $3 million in venture capital, which is a good amount in terms of seed capital. But I've sort of experienced the creative game from both sides. I'm from the Big Island in Hawaii, which is an awesome place, and hopefully we can build our tech scene there so all of you can just move out there and keep doing what you're doing, but in Hawaii. So there we go. I grew up in a very small town out there, and I think that maybe helped me when I was a young kid just start making things, because if you grow up in a small town and there's nothing else to do, you have to make your own fun. I don't know why I wanted to share a couple of these, but I was thinking about it. We had a game called Run from Cars, and the whole point was that at night when the street lights came on in our neighborhood, it was sort of L-shaped, and the goal is to see how far you could get before a car's headlights came and you had to run back down to the bushes. And then an extension of that was throwing these little KOOSH balls at cars in the dark, which is, as an adult now, it's like such a shitty thing to do that because it would terrify somebody. But I think as a kid, maybe being creative and being mischievous was part of what made me a creative later. I think being mischievous is sort of looking to push the limits of where the rules exist. And when you're making new things, that's largely what we're doing. This is the time. There really has never been a time like this for us, for creatives to make things. The tools are getting cheaper and cheaper. Now with Photoshop's new pricing, we can actually legit pay for licenses of Photoshop. EC2 and other tools allow us to build our websites for basically next to nothing. The audience is online. They're already there. They're waiting for us. I would encourage you to do it now. Don't wait until it's perfect. Again, I started a website for people to name colors. I didn't intend for that to be something I didn't think it could be, but simply starting the process is what got me going. So whether it's lean startup, MVP, iterative, whatever your phrase is for you, it's just basically get started, ship the first thing, because that's where it all begins. And the other side of that is just to don't wait until you're perfect. I think a lot of us figure out, well, I just want to get a little bit better at my design or get a little bit better at developing. We're always going to be growing, learning, changing. And so much I think of the best way to learn is actually learning by doing. I have learned so much, some of it very painfully, but just by doing and getting out there I think is really the best way to learn. And it feels a little weird for me, like standing in a podium giving sort of lecture talks, because these are not hard facts or scientifically proven things. This is my life and my story. So it'd be more comfortable for me as a conversation rather than a lecture. So I know there's specifically a time at the end to ask questions, but anywhere along the process, if I'm talking about something that you specifically want to know more about, or if I say something really dumb and you feel like it's important to correct me so I don't go through the rest of my life saying stuff like that, just go ahead and shout it out. I'd love to have more of a conversation. Relating to the last point about saying something dumb, I'm by far not the smartest person in this room. I say that not just to self-deprecate, but to make sure you guys all know that you are better than me, and that you are fully capable of shipping amazing stuff and doing it, and I just want to make sure you know you should and could and can do it. The two most important things that I do have, which has allowed me to succeed, one is that I'm naively optimistic, and I think that's probably a common trait of anybody who's creative or an entrepreneur. If we knew enough to know that we couldn't do it, we wouldn't. But we, for some reason, believe out of all the millions of people that try, we are ones that can succeed in what we do, and so we go out and we try and we do it. I've also seen this most true in probably like the last year and a half, where we had raised venture capital and stuff is moving at a different pace, and we went from 4 or 5 people to 15 people, and every few months I would look back from like 2 months ago at how I thought the world looked and how I thought I needed to do things, and would just kind of laugh at how naive I was, that I really didn't know anything. And then and this happened every 2 months, and then even on like the moment where I'm reflecting, I'm doing it from a perspective of that I think I actually have figured it out, and then like another 2 minutes later I'll laugh at that moment of myself. So it's a process where you just keep going and you're optimistic that you'll be able to do something really big. The other thing that is most helpful for me in not being super smart, again, I didn't test very well on standardized tests in school, but I've always been clever, and that was just the ability to kind of see a simple solution to something that possibly was complex. The other way to describe that is I'm just dumb enough to not know I'm smart. So somebody else would approach a problem and say, well, this is the way we do it because I understand this is the process and this is how you get to the solution. And somebody else like me comes like, well, I don't know how that process works, but looking at it from this angle, I see a different way that we can do this. And so just to tell you a little bit about my journey, and hopefully there's some things along the way that are useful for you and what you're doing. And I'll start largely at my fertile idea time, which probably was when I was maybe 20, 25. I think we were kind of at the end of Flash's new renaissance, and it was a time where there was just a lot of creativity happening. I think what Flash did was it gave us this restricted platform, but yet it was sort of open and creative, and so it was a blank canvas, but it was almost restricted and there was rules to follow, and so that gave us a chance to really be creative inside of it. I would also define this as my someday when I grow up I want to be Drew phase, because I'm super jealous of the amount of really cool stuff that this guy just keeps building. You can slow it down and give us some time to catch up. But for posterity, we'll look through at some of these. I had built IamSensitive.com, which was a place where you could fill out a form and you could add your name to a list of other sensitive people. So that was it. Another one was I wish I would, and then there's 2 different forms. It evolved this. One was I wish I would have, and then I wish I would have not. And again, it was just sort of creative expression. I wish I would have had a second cup of coffee before I came up, or I wish I would have not had the second cup of coffee because now I have to poop. Like whatever your creative expression was, looking back now, I see how that sort of evolved into what eventually shipped as Color Lovers, which people resonated with, but it was just this, creative platform. Imvalesco was the first chance that I had to see that there was a business model in things. These other things were just random creative projects. Imvalesco was deal flow software to manage distressed real estate investing. Super boring, but there was a process to it of finding the property, talking to a homeowner, etc. And I'd actually built it and then had sold it for like it was a subscription, $150 a month, and I had like 10 investors paying for it. And at the time, that basically paid my living wage. And so that was the first real example of like, okay, I can make creative things, but I actually can earn a living from doing these things. And it was super ugly, but it worked. Another thing that kind of evolved from that was the site REI Toolbelt, it's Real Estate Investing Toolbelt. And this is way too early for its time, but we had built a community for real estate investors, so forums, profiles. This is whatever, 12 years ago, so before communities really existed. But this was the first chance that I had to build a social network and see the value of the community, that I didn't have to create all the assets, what was most valuable, that I could enable a community to connect, and what they brought was really what was valuable. And the last little thing I did was called In a Nutshell, and I had a photographer friend shoot a photo of this walnut shell with a piece of paper in it, and then I built the web form that would let you change the text that was in the nutshell. So you could say things like, oh, here's thermodynamics in a nutshell, and it would just be a photo with the word inside of it. I told you I wasn't the smartest person in this room. And then this thing happened. This was over a weekend. I designed and coded the first version of Color Lovers. It was like December 15th, 2004. The first version, this is a very small screenshot, sorry. Basically, a lot of my projects, Web Archive doesn't even feel bothered to keep screenshots of anymore. So some of this stuff is super old. But V1 I built, and it was just about selecting a hex value for a color, naming it, and then sharing it with the community. And then other people could rate it from 0 to 10. Basically, this was hot or not for color. I did it as a joke with designer friends to say, you know, I like this blue and you think it's ugly. But I wanted to know what the community thought. And so this is the whole MVP, which is somebody named this color, other people have rated it, they described it, and then the rest can network around it. And then this part is going to be mind-blowing. I evolved the product to have more than one color. It was a palette. And it's actually a 5-color palette, although this one's 4. But now in hindsight, this is actually the thing that took it from sort of the goofy thing that I'd done before to something that really would live on, because it had the aspect of creative expression. It enabled people to create, again, within a restricted platform where, you know, simply naming and arranging colors is anybody could do it. It's easy to do, but it was approachable, and then the end result could be artistic. I mean, there's millions of like amazing palettes in there that tell a story. And then for designers, for creatives, it became a utility. You know, we are all busy creating a project, and you knew you wanted a palette with blue in it. You didn't want to think about the colors yourself. You can search the palettes on Color Lovers. And so it had sort of the community engagement side, but it also had a utility. And that's why, in my opinion, I think it really survived and it continued to grow. But the real reason I did this site, which inspired me, is I had gone to school originally as a computer science major. I dropped out, went to work for a web agency, and then had gone back to school as a fashion major, not because I wanted to construct garments, but I just I liked style and fashion and storytelling and editorial through that. And they made me take an art class, and I'm sure most of you, if you've gone to art school, have done this. You have to mix paint basically for an entire semester so that you can know the relationships of color. And I thought, sure, that's useful. But if we're talking about color theory, the fact that we're not addressing that this is really a truly unique experience for everybody, our eyes interpret light differently than each other. Not only that, we have different personal associations with colors. So if you have possibly almost drowned and dark blue is a scary color to you, then you'd hate my shirt. If the first time you ever kissed a girl was on the beach at night and the ocean was dark blue, then you might really like this shirt. And so it was such a unique thing for everybody. It was crazy to me that you could just sort of prescribe that one color was this year's color for everybody. And so Color Lovers was an experiment of, no, I wanted to see what the world thought about this. Sometimes not being super smart is actually useful. I think I built possibly the first closed beta site ever. I built Color Lovers, and the user ID field in the database I had set as a tiny int, and then I'd actually gone off on a trip. So people were signing up, and when I got to 255 users, the database basically broke. It wouldn't let anybody else write into it because it couldn't handle any more fields, which actually worked out really well because there was 255 people that were using it, and they were all excited about it, and then nobody else could get in. And so it built this, you know, I want to get into the closed beta vibe. And so where I ended up going and why the closed beta worked was that 9 days after I built Color Lovers, sort of the biggest major disaster of my life, and maybe it was the biggest one that had happened since mass media or social media really existed, so it was that much more present for us. This was the tsunami that happened in Asia, which affected a lot of countries around the area. It was centered off of Banda Aceh in Indonesia. And I was at home with family in Portland. Again, I'm tinkering around building shit on the internet, and I felt like because I was between things, I wanted to go and I wanted to help and see what I could do. I emailed around to a bunch of different organizations, and nobody would take me because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a skilled builder. But I knew that somehow if I could get there, I really could just help somebody. Again, being naively optimistic. So I ended up I booked a flight. I sort of Goldilocks tested all the countries to figure out that Phuket, Thailand was westernized, but they had been affected, and so it wouldn't be super crazy. This is my first real international trip. So I was just going to go and figure out what I could do. And through the internet, I had found a couple of different volunteer centers that were just backpackers that had showed up to help. And in Bang Tao, Thailand, it's really dark up there, sorry. There was basically a hotel, much smaller than this, but it had its bottom floor blown out, and then the hotel rooms upstairs, backpackers were just staying in. And then every day we'd help the hotel grounds, but you would also go out in the community and you would just help whomever needed help. And I had originally planned my trip to be there. I was going to do a month of volunteering, then I was going to backpack a month, and I thought I was going to be doing manual labor in the sun, so I was going to be super ripped and tan by the end of my trip. And then I did 1 day of manual labor, and the second day somebody was like, oh, the printer's broke, so we can't like print what we needed to print. It's like, all right, I can probably figure this out, like how broke is it? And then I spent the next 5 months in an office in Bang Tao, getting fat, eating Thai food, and drinking a lot of beer. So not what I intended, but what I learned was that I was better suited to help others by enabling others to do good work. And the sort of the selfish part of like, well, I wanted to be there to hand the food out, meant only I could do so much, but if I use my skills, it's sort of the chaos management side of things, that I could enable more people to do good and sort of do good at scale. And so this is where I really figured out that, again, maybe it's being creative or a designer or a hacker or something, you're finding simple solutions to complex things, and this really helped in chaos management, where every day it was event planning. And it's not just the MacGyver side of thing or what's the limited resources I have to solve a problem. Again, we sort of approach things from that more Martha Stewart side. Is what I create, I want to be lasting. I want it to be great. I want it to be something that's value adding to the community that I'm in. An example of it would be like when we manage projects, it's usually about a couple hundred people or the amount of this group here. But that if tomorrow we were going to go out into this community and figure out who needs help, who's got cars, how many cars do we have, what projects are in walking distance, and it changed every day. And so I actually enjoyed running that process. But out of Thailand, we formed a 501c3 nonprofit called All Hands Volunteers, which has now helped like 35,000 families. We have 42 projects in 8 countries around the world. And so I did the operations side of it, leading the projects for about a year. This is a photo of basically 200 volunteers living in a weird little church annex building in Biloxi, Mississippi after Katrina. And a guy I had met in Thailand was a retired businessman. And when we got back to the States, I told him, for me, that was sort of this life-changing trip. Like, if you can fund this, if you can do the legal side of setting the nonprofit up, then I'll go run these projects for us. And we didn't have to wait very long. Katrina happened, and then we were there I think like 4 days after in Mississippi, starting to run this new project. But the organization still exists. Basically, the model is we provide the food, the tools, the housing, the logistics for you. It's so long as you get yourself there. You can be there a day, a week, a month, as long as you want, and you get to do meaningful work. So I would encourage all of you to check that out sometime in your life. Hands.org is the site. Whenever you have a break, you can go check it out. And again, it's an amazing experience for the community that you're helping, but I think for a lot of people it's life-changing for yourself as well. It's a way to see the world in a little bit of a different lens. And there's opportunities to solve lots of really big problems with creative solutions. In Mississippi, there was a storm surge. It was like 20 feet, and it basically came and took everything away. And so getting around became hard to do. If you're a local in a small community, you don't necessarily remember street names and numbers. You just know, like, well, this park I always take my kid to is like, go past Joe's Crab Shack, take a left, there's this big tree, and then the park is across the street. Well, like, the Crab Shack isn't there, so they're just gone. The tree might not even be there, so you're never going to find that park. And so going all the way back to my real estate days, I took the bandit signs, like we buy houses, plastic corrugated signs, and I cut it into strips, I bought reflective lettering, and then we had a team of people that made street signs that we took up and stapled to all the telephone poles. Because it wasn't just for the locals to get around, it was for us, it was Red Cross, it was everybody else who was trying to get around, and this is pre-iPhone GPS time. It enabled a way for people to know where they were going, and then the branding side, we put our sticker on every street sign. So that was actually really huge for us too, because being a brand new nonprofit, it actually got people to know who we were, and ended up then giving us that much more access to helping people. And then again, sort of the first realization I had with doing my nonprofit that I could do more by helping other people help people. I had the same feeling that I had started working on Color Lovers and then immediately went and did this 1.5 years of living around the world, and I would always come back and work on the site. I fixed the tiny int problem. But that I could keep doing that, or I could go back to tech, because tech is the world where you can do some crazy site and then have this, you know, massive reward from it. And a nonprofit is a forever fundraising startup. And so I just said, all right, I'm going to stop doing this work because I can go back to tech, and then hopefully someday I can support the nonprofit in that much bigger of a level. So I stepped down from operations just to being on the board seat, and I still care about the organization. I don't find enough time to volunteer as much as I would like to. But I came back to Color Lovers, and this thing was just like the site that wouldn't die. It was killing the shared servers it was on. I kept having to like rebuild it as we went. But I had talked to my nonprofit co-founder, the retired tech guy, and I said, look, I want to go back to this tech thing. There's something here to this site. It keeps growing. Give me my friends and family loan, and I can go and do this. And then I had like the darkest days of my entrepreneurial journey. I borrowed money from basically a friend to go and do this. Color Lovers at the time was ad-based revenue, and if any of you are doing ad-based products, it's really painful. You're sort of at the mercy of your page views, and then you're at the mercy of the ad networks that often, you know, will run a whole campaign and then pay you net 90. And I just spent 1.5 years not working, basically letting my credit go to shit to start the nonprofit. And then I decided that was the best time for me to go start a company. And so I ended up like broker than broke. The business account was overdrawn, my personal account was overdrawn, and then like I'm waiting for ad checks to come in. They say they're going to come, so I check the mail Monday. It's not there. Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way till Friday of just not actually having any money. And I'm eating my food. I have nothing else to do for that weekend. And it was just that moment. It's funny for me now in hindsight because it was the full apex top of like all bad in my life. I was at the post office waiting for this check. I had no money for the weekend, eating my food. And I was just like, life was blank at that point. I just didn't want to be where I was. So I had whatever, 3/4 tank of gas, and I was just going to leave. I just wanted to drive somewhere. I didn't care what happened when I got there or how I would get back. I just didn't want to be where I was. So I just started driving, and then my check engine light went on. So like, I couldn't even leave town. I like, couldn't run away from the problems that I had. So I just went to sleep for like the whole weekend, which is another good experience because when I woke back up basically on Monday, like I was still alive, the internet was still on, people were still using the site. Like it was fine. It sucked, but it was always going to continue, and so I could. And then the other side of that is if you look at just the last 1.5 years of my life, which was, you know, had raised a couple more seed rounds. Creative Market and Color Lovers were acquired by Autodesk in February of this year. I have an awesome wife. I have a beautiful daughter. Like my life looks like super successful in the last lens of it. But I think a lot of times in the storytelling there isn't the context of, well, this was 10 years to actually get here. But I won't dwell too long on the negatives because you're either in it now, you've been in it, or you're going to be in it, but you get through it. So we don't need to talk that much about it. It's just other than to say it gets a lot better. The shit is hard, but you'll make it. So go get it. What happened with Color Lovers was that we had done it for long enough. There's probably a couple million users at this time. We got into Y Combinator with it, but we weren't exactly sure what the business model for it was. We knew that we could aggregate all of the data of our users and then sell color market research. You know, Pantone says tangerine orange is this year's color of the year for everybody, and we could say, well, actually, a bunch of these people in this area of the world are really using blue a lot, or this word is tagged a lot in these colors. And so we raised our first round of funding to go do that, to be this big data company. And then like gut checked ourselves early on to say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to run a data company. You know, so much of what Color Lovers is, 5-time Webby nominee for Best Community, was the community. So it was a kind of a crappy business model to extract data from our users and then sell it on the side. And so we just basically didn't want to do that. But the thing that we had noticed along the way is that we did 2 manual transactions. At this point, Color Lovers was more than just color palettes. We built simple pattern design tools as well. And we helped 2 of our users sell these patterns. One was to MetLife Insurance, where it was a whole window display with Charlie Brown and Snoopy, and they had bought the leaf pattern for us for the backdrop. And then HarperCollins Books also bought a pattern. And so we just said, why don't we do that? Like our members are creating really cool stuff. We can help them monetize this. That adds value back to our community. Like I'm down for that. Let's do that. And so we had raised the second seed round to sort of go off in this new direction. But Color Lovers is a weird site. It's got a British spelling of the word color. It's got love in the title. You love things. For a lot of people, that's weird. And so putting a marketplace inside of it, it kind of confused two stories. And so we wanted to just tell the best story possible about making the best place to buy and sell creative assets and all kinds of creative assets, not just palettes and patterns and colors that we had, but web themes, add-ons, like everything that we use as creatives. I wanted to build the best place where you could go and get all of it. And that's when we did our pivot, which is the Ross quote from, this is a bad impersonation. But we wanted to build a creative market and really just make it all about the sellers. We feature the people at the top of the marketplace because for us, we're sort of the Etsy of digital. It was about artists and producers that create and craft really cool things that then help other people solve that blank canvas problem. It gives them the assets to do their work. And it became immediately clear for us that this was going to be a success. People responded incredibly positively to it. We had 75,000 people on our early access list. Granted, I didn't pivot from car insurance to design. I'd been in the design world for 10 years, so when we started doing something new, we had a big community to reach out to and bring them on. One of the most important measures of success for us in our first year is we paid out $1 million in earnings to all of our sellers. And that was just reinforcing the fact that, one, that we have a business model. We make 30% of all revenue. So we were making money, but more importantly, the people that were in our marketplace were earning a living, some of them. And that was huge for us. When it's obvious, like when you ship a product that's a turd, like in a nutshell, like nobody's going to use it, it's not worth it. When you have something that really just hits a stride and grows, it's obvious. It's really hard when it's not obvious. Color Lovers had a lot of signals of success as early users. They're shutting down the shared server that I'm on. Now there's 4 million registered users. I don't know how many millions of page views. And so those things seem like signals of validation that we are onto something, but we never really hit like a true explosive stride. Like, what was the point of Color Lovers? Where would it really get successful? The thing I learned the most was, we were dying this life of 1,000 cuts, dying the death of 1,000 features. When you're bootstrapping, one of the dangers is you ship something that is a little bit successful, makes you a little bit of money, and then it's hard to cut it off because that's helping you survive. But over several years, we had so many features and so much feature debt that it got really hard to then have the freedom of your mind to say, all right, let's just think of something big. And so that was the opportunity we saw. As soon as creative markets started showing that it was really going to take off, it made it really obvious for us to just do the full pivot, to stop and refocus. But the hard part about that is you let a lot of people down. Color Lovers has this really passionate community, and they're probably super bummed that the site hasn't been really updated in like a year and a half or more. But this is also a lesson I learned with doing the nonprofit stuff. When we were entrepreneurial, capitalistic people that went to do volunteer work. So we didn't want to just help one person. We wanted to sort of be as mass scale of doing good as possible. So it was all about doing the most good. But that's hard because you might have somebody right here who's injured and needs your help. And you have to say, I am actually not going to stop and help you because there's 10 people over there that I can help if I just go over there. And so I'll try and remember you, I'll try and help you, but you're making a very difficult decision. And so for Color Lovers, we had to do the same thing. We had to say, all right, we're going to not help this community because we actually see a better way to empower creatives and help them in this new thing that we're doing. And so we moved on to that. This is probably a topic I could spend a lot of time about because for a lot of us that build web projects, this is sort of one of the holy grail opportunities. You either get lifestyle business that's throwing cash at you, you get acquired, or you go IPO. The IPO route's a lot harder to do. But earlier this year, again, we sold the company, which was Color Lovers and Creative Market, to Autodesk. I think you all know Autodesk. They make like everything with their software. It's like physical products, design products, movies, media. And the reason we did this is a couple of things. One, I'm 10 years into the same company, so I have a growing family. So it was an opportunity for me, but more so I wanted to make sure it was an opportunity for everybody else on my team, and it was really an opportunity for the community. And if one of those didn't fit, we just wouldn't have done the deal. So my co-founders and I really spent time thinking about this. And it turned out they had the same mission than we do. Our mission was always to make beautiful designs simple and accessible to everybody. Theirs was the same thing, they just used different words, and I don't ever remember what it is, but it's basically the same thing. And that we would continue doing exactly what we do and how we do it. We could lead the vision of our product so that we could make sure that we kept enabling this empowerment for creatives. And that again, that leveraging the scale at what Autodesk has, that we could bring more to our marketplace, that we could actually reach out to professional creatives that were doing architecture and CAD models and mesh models for designers. It let us take the marketplace even beyond what we knew as sort of flat, you know, the 2D designers of the world, and take it to this 3D world.
How big was your team's IMMA and color levers or creative market at this point?
Yep. So basically, till Color Lovers, and then we really started pivoting, it was always just like 4 of us. It was the 3 co-founders. So I'll take a step back. I had started Color Lovers by myself. My co-founder, Aaron, had done Color Schemer, which was desktop color matching software. We were like frenemies for a few years because he had desktop software and I had the community. I even stole a blog post from him and I made it better on my own blog. And we'd met a couple of times and it just didn't fit. And then when I was really saying I was going to go full time at this, we got back together over a long weekend and we just said, like, let's do this together. And I probably should have had a slide on this. I definitely recommend doing this with other people. It's like super hard. There's very dark times. There's lonely times. But then even the positive side, the positive times, you want to share it with the people that you care about. And those are often your friends. I think a lot of common business advice is don't go into business with friends. If you can set it up in a way where you both know that, like, hey, if this isn't working at some point, it's just not going to work. And we're both okay with that. Then going at it with friends is the best way to do it. Because the truth is, if you have a co-founder, I've talked to Aaron and Chris like every day, multiple times a day for the past like 6 years. Like, is a full relationship that you have with somebody. So, Chris I'd also found as a developer. I'm an incredibly shitty developer. I take every shortcut possible. He was a really good one. So he did all the web tech for Color Lovers. And so the 3 of us, when we co-founded the company 6 years after I actually started it, but that was the time, that was when we were really going to go and do it. So luckily, you know, Chris is the hacker, Aaron is the product designer guy, and Aaron and I can overlap, but then I went to do the business. So it was sort of the perfect little tripod of going out as a unit so that we could all tackle separate things. And then we'd had a couple of employees when we started Color Lovers. When we raised the funding, it was all about, you know, growth. I was in Hawaii and moved back to San Francisco to try and like get the business ready to go get a Series A or get acquired. And so we got to about 14 people. 7 of us were in San Francisco, and then the other 7 were remote. As co-founders, we were always remote from each other, so it meant that we could be remote as we scaled the company. My co-founders have now since moved to San Francisco. That was part of the deal. But we still have a designer in the UK, a designer in Austin, developers, South Carolina, Albany, New York, kind of people are all over the place. But it was 15 of us at the time we got acquired. Yep. And then before we get to the question, the little parting advice is don't trust speaker advice. It's just such a unique experience. Like, this all worked for me because I am me, and I went through this really unique journey in myself. And so, you know, look for the general truths. Look for things that are common concepts that you think you can apply to how you do things. But I most often give advice about fundraising because I'm sort of abnormal. I basically raised 3 seed rounds. So if you're trying to raise like a $10 million A, I'm not the guy to help you. But if you're, you know, I've got this product, I want to go raise $1 million or $500,000 or some seed round. I've done that a few times now. So I give a lot of advice about that. But I've also heard a lot of other people give advice about the same stuff. And then the analogy I have for this is that, like, all of us are on one side of this giant field, and all of the ammunitions we need are on the other side, and there's a minefield, and there's gunfire, and there's all this crap. And somebody comes back, like, with armloads of, like, bullets and guns or whatever you need to kill people with. And we're like, oh my God, how did you do that? We need to get over there. And he's like, well, what I did was I just hopped on one leg the whole time, and I found that lower surface area meant I didn't hit as many mines, and the pace of my jumping meant that I, you know, timed it right with the artillery. And it's just like he just lucked out. Like, he probably twisted his ankle halfway in and then hobbled the whole rest of the way. But then when you get back and you analyze it, you like make sense out of the journey. You know, you find like cool advice to tell based on that. And so the next person like hops and like, you know, landmine on the first hop or whatever. So, you know, it's just totally unique. So I think you need to find that journey for yourself. But this other side of that is just to go ahead and do it, and to quit. I am a serial quitter. I quit a lot of stuff in my life. I've taken a lot of flack from relationships, my family, my friends, because traditionally you're not supposed to quit things. You just sort of like commit to something, then you go and do it. I don't work that way. If I don't like doing something, I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't see the point in doing it, so I will just quit. But I think you really have to quit a lot of things to be really great at any one thing. So quit wasting your time on other things that don't let you get there. If you want to be healthy, quit eating crap. Quitting doesn't have to be a negative. It can be a positive if you're using it to then focus on whatever you most want to do in life. I'm really terrible at email, but if I can help you in any way, please send me an email. It might mean that you have to ping me a couple times because I have not figured out how to scale email. But if I can, I want to be able to help you. The other tip that's related to this, if anytime you're emailing somebody to get help, is just sort of assume I'm already going to help you, so you don't have to send the email to ask if I will help you, and then just immediately get to how I can add value and how I can help. Sometimes I'll get an email from somebody that's like, I want to raise funding, what should I do? It's like, I can't help you from that phase. You need to do a little bit of your own work. And so it's, I'd like to raise money, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to get an intro to this person, how can you help because you see that I'm related? Give me a little bit of a shortcut to make it easier to help you on the really technical side of your problem rather than just the general side of it. But if you don't know how to get started, I'm happy to help on the general side as well. That's a question answer. You can look at my kid.
Questions, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And looking at my kid.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions?
Mine's more of a statement than a question.
Okay.
For the longest time, I have been using both Color Lovers and Color Schemer.
Cool.
And they kind of weirdly blended at oftentimes. And it's funny to hear that you're frenemies
Yep.
and then frenemies all along, and it kind of makes sense of the two.
Well, I think weirdly blended is probably how we actually integrated the products. Like you can read color palettes from Color Lovers in Color Schemer, but we never united everything. Related to this, Color Lovers, if we were going to go do the data company, was a weird name to have as a color company. And so we had rebranded everything as Chroma Ohm, Color Ohm Enlightenment. It's going to be the Color Enlightenment Company. And so we created this new parent entity and we merged everything underneath it. And then every time I go somewhere and I maybe talk to you and I say, oh, we're Chroma Ohm. You'd be like, what the hell is that? Like, oh, it's Color Lovers. Oh. And so we did that enough, like, why did we, like, nobody knows the new brand. We should just say that we're Color Lovers and Color Schemer. And so this Chroma Ohm brand, like, happened and then slowly died. So, but yes, we weirdly integrated for a while.
Any other questions?
It's making you walk all over the place.
Hey,
Hey.
could you talk a little bit more about the acquisition? Maybe just share whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us.
Sure.
Walk us through it.
So when I had previously given founder talks, I specifically have talked about like money and wealth because I feel like it's not something that we talk about, especially in related to like internet company world. Acquisition prices either get disclosed or they don't, and if they don't get disclosed, I want people to assume it was the biggest number possible. And when big numbers are like hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars, like, this is just what happens, especially like, I live in San Francisco, so it's this just crazy epicenter of massive amounts of ridiculous wealth. And so nobody really talks about wealth, and I think that one is a detriment to all of us. Like, this is a very hard journey to go on, and it would be nice to know like what you're doing it for, what a possible or theoretical end result could be. And so at the time, I would just say like, look, when I have an exit, I'm going to just tell everybody my numbers, and I'm going to be straight up about it. Again, I was a little naive. One, there's just deal structure. Like, I can't actually name the price of our acquisition unless Autodesk does, so I can't actually do that. But I can say that, one, just the perception of wealth. I had talked about this in slides before, and I do know that it's true. That the quality of life difference when you're $50,000 in debt to having zero debt is wildly different. Like, when you're in debt, you just don't have a lot of options. You're simply trying to climb out of the hole that you're in. When you're debt free, you don't have any like resources to go and do something, but you at least have options. If you can get from no savings to 50,000 in savings, again, it means that you sort of know you have a safety net, and then the level of comfort is much more supportive of going to do risky things. If you get to $500,000 versus 50, it's like wildly different because now you can buy a house, or you know that you've got your kids' money set aside. And then the difference of like $500,000 and $5 million is like, again, a hugely different, because now you don't have just enough money for yourself, you begin to have money for other people, like siblings or charities or anything, other causes that you care about. And this is the part of the story where I don't know anything about. But I do believe, having talked to other people that have massive wealth, that the change in your life when you go from like 5 million in the bank to 50 million or 500 million is like you just got bigger planes or something. Like you got maybe 3 houses instead of 1, although you can only be in 1 house at any given time. So like the quality of life change like significantly trails off. From this deal, it was material for me. I made a few $1 million on it after taxes. Taxes are painful, so whatever you make, like half of it is going in taxes. But it's given me an ability to actually, one, know I can take care of my family. If you think about kids going to school, that's a ton of money in land. But again, it's given me a different layer of safety where actually now I feel like I need to go get more. I'm more motivated now about money than I ever have been, because I have enough to know how meaningful it is to know that my family is taken care of, that I really want to make sure that all my siblings have that, or my closest friends have that, or the people that I care about most. So the drive for wealth now is very different than it was before, which is I wanted nice things, or I wanted a house. It's now taking care of everybody the way that I feel safe about myself. So yeah, I can't really talk too much about the acquisition, but that was a related wealth thing. Did that answer your question? Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you for the talk. Just unrelated to your talk, or what your answer was just now about your quality of life kind of not changing significantly after a certain amount. How do you feel about investments in companies? I feel like when you are in debt or you aren't a millionaire, starting any little thing feels like a huge risk because you don't have that safety net. And I live in San Francisco too, and I see kind of like VCs and incubators who kind of maybe invest in like 100 and they hope that one makes it to get their investment in. And
Yep.
I guess it feels like a lot of money is thrown around. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. And
Yep. Yeah, so one part of that is that money is getting thrown around right now. I think more easy than it has been done in the past. So if you got a good idea that you're really passionate about and you see that some amount of fundraising is helpful, then this is the time to go and get it. The markets will align themselves at some point. It'll be more difficult, but right now we're still in this frothy, it's easier to go raise seed funding than it is before. And again, there's 2 edges to that. One, when you're bootstrapping, you're giving yourself more time to solve the right problems, figure out, your product market fit, and really get to the thing you think you should then ramp up. So there's usefulness in bootstrapping. But at the same time, if you're struggling, then you can't hire the guy that you really need or the girl that you really need. You're just waiting until you get to some revenue threshold that you can go and do it, so it holds you back. But the other side of fundraising is like the rocket goes. Like as soon as you fundraise, you have to now go as fast as you can at whatever at that moment you assume was right. And that's hard because often the ideas are iterative when we're generally wrong. And you also have outside pressure. I mean, bootstrapping is all the inside pressure, or maybe it's not. You have a spouse, a family that's putting pressure on you. The outside pressure from investors is difficult. But it's also, to be honest, a little different. I feel much more concerned about like my friends and family investors who gave me money than the VC. I mean, that's their job, right? I mean, I feel if I had lost my investors' money, that's part of the game. If I had lost, I actually did lose. My grandmother gave me $30,000 when I was doing the real estate company, and I lost all that. And I still feel worse about that than any other sort of investment thing I'd ever done. But so, I guess your point of, investors are looking for a 1 in 100 chance of success. And so if you're trying to figure out your one idea out of 100 that you think is worth sort of going and chasing, again, that's that harder thing to know of. It's obvious when it's probably not going to work. and it's obvious when it's really successful. It's often it's getting a little bit of traction, and is this really the one? I don't have a perfect answer to that other than to say, like, maybe push it a little bit harder, stretch outside of your means to just see if you can reach more of an audience and then get critical feedback. And sometimes, there's critical feedback and you say, I just don't care. Like, I'm going to do it anyway. I believe in this. And there's like amazing products that never would have existed if somebody just listened to the market about it. And that's, again, sort of the hardest part of that. Sure. So like me having wealth, do I see a different quality of products?
Well, like if you have more money, you don't, you can almost try anything, and you don't have to like believe in something super strong. And the same thing with just like San Francisco and the tech scene. There's so much money. It's like, hey, you want to do a laundry service? Here's some money. But
Yeah.
like really curating and focusing on
Yep. San Francisco is an amazing place to be for what we do because it's just kind of an epicenter, but it's also a really weird place to be. There is such an echo chamber of like ideas and startups and things that I think it actually, in some ways, can hurt. I mean, there's really cool ideas. There is like a deliver-to-you service for everything in San Francisco. There's dozens of new food ones. Actually, on the Embarcadero where I work, there's some people right now protesting like a labor dispute. They have this big, puppet-looking death with the sickle, and then they're dressed as death, and they're handing out these flyers that says like this shop practices, unfair labor wage practices. But I was walking by one, they looked familiar too. The top of their big banner that's on the side of the road has like a tear-off part for the name. And so they're like protesters as a service. Like somehow you find these guys, they put a different name up on the thing, and then they come and protest for you. And it's like comical to me because that's everything in San Francisco now is like, you want laundry? Do you want bath soap? Like everything comes to you. So there is, I think, somewhat of a lower quality of things. Like it's just people, oh, I could do this for that. It's like, I don't think that's great. I think it's almost good if you can exist in two worlds, like maybe here where it's slightly more normal and spend some time in San Francisco, get the value of those, but then come back to where normal people live and figure out like, what are the problems in the world? Like what do you really need in your life? I've also seen that with like fellow founders that have had exits and are now wealthy and they're just depressed. It's like I didn't have enough money because they're comparing themselves to other super rich people. And it's like, just go to a normal place in the world and just like sit at a diner all day and hang out and see the waitress that's probably like 60 years old that's been doing this her whole life and then try and feel bad about having money. So I'm excited, spend more time in Hawaii now where I'm living in a community that's actually further behind in tech than anywhere else, and trying to get the perspective of like, all right, what are real problems that I can solve? I think everybody now wants to sort of do the Elon Musk type problems in the world, solar, sending rockets to space. Like that's really cool stuff. The best one is like Elon Musk has built this self-landing spaceship for the same amount of money that Pinterest has raised. And I'm not just saying that to like belittle Pinterest. It's just, where are we spending our time and energy on life's problems? So hopefully you do something, but do something great because you have the potential to do it. Yep.
Can you go more into different ideas you have living back home and possibilities for Hawaii?
Yep. So Hawaii has a very early tech scene. It also suffers from the fact that people live on different islands. So even if you get a scene going on Maui or Oahu, I mean, it's a flight away for me to get there. And for the same amount of effort, I could fly to San Francisco as I can fly to Kauai. So it's different, I think, than most places. But I also see the same parallel. I started COLOURLOVERS when I lived in Portland, Oregon. It's like 8 years ago. There were no other people doing startups. There wasn't really access to venture capital. There wasn't a scene. But now Portland has incubators. There's like legit companies that have raised, I think, IPOs, acquisitions. Like it is now a mature scene. And the other thing that I'm excited to see is that you don't have to be in San Francisco anymore. San Diego has a scene. LA has a scene. Seattle has a scene. Like you can make it now where you are. Hawaii is even further back from that, but there's also little signals. The more people like myself, who I'm now hopeful that I can go back and not get sucked back to the mainland if my next thing gets to a certain stage, I can just say like, nope, I'm doing it here. People that are from Hawaii who have technical skills, like seeing opportunities and taking that home, because we were it's has suffered talent drain over the past 10 years. Like anybody that had skills went to wherever they could be most useful or where they could get the most value out of it, and so they left. And so we're in this phase now of there's a few companies, they don't really have the resources, there's the beginnings of funding, but if we can start doing some angel investing and smart Hawaii people stay in Hawaii, or if you just want to live somewhere awesome and San Diego's not quite awesome enough, then just move to Hawaii and do it from there. Because you really just need kind of internet, and the internet speeds are getting there. So there's an incubator on Oahu. So if you're looking for incubators, there is one there that has batches regularly. There's a couple, they just raised a new seed stage venture fund, so it's beginning. I think I'm done with my time.
Any other questions?
Just like super quick question.
Sure.
During your acquisition, did you use an M&A advisor?
No, so I've actually, this is the 5th time that I've gone through an acquisition process, but this time it actually happened. So in the whatever 10 years, 5 different times, somebody has either approached me or I approached them about buying what I was doing. 2 of those times I did work with like M&A people. The first time with Color Lovers, it was starting to get big, and I was like, all right, I should probably sell this because I'm struggling. And they went out and like tried to go to the market and pitch it, and it just didn't really work. And the number, I mean, M&A people that do this, they take like 150,000 flat fee plus some percentage, and like I was only gonna be able to sell it for a couple $100,000, so it just didn't make any sense. Further on, we were getting offers from a few people, and we did use an M&A advisor person that was gonna help us. It was almost more to just play good cop, bad cop. Like you want to negotiate really hard, but at the same time, you don't want to create a bad relationship with the people that you're going to go and work with. And so that, in my mind, it was that person that could go be kind of a dick, but try and get us more. But that process didn't work either. And again, I think for me, what worked out is that I didn't like doing that. I didn't want to work through somebody else. I just wanted to have a conversation with somebody. And I felt like, in which we did, we got an offer that really rewarded everybody, that I'd rather just work directly with somebody. But we did, we actually knew that we were going to get an offer from a different company. And when I knew that this last time, I went out to everybody. I reached out to Shutterstock, Fab, Etsy, Yahoo, Autodesk. So look, if I'm going to go consider a possible real offer, I just want to know what else is out there. And I'm glad that I had done that, because then that's how I got introduced to Autodesk. And they moved super quick. They were the most transparent, legit people. A lot of other companies would do things like, oh, it's so amazing you guys have launched this marketplace, but it really hasn't been out very long, so it's not really that valuable. It's like compliment or insult, don't do both. And then Autodesk was just really straight up about the whole process. So the last time I didn't use it, and we just used the network that we already had, and like normal people had a conversation, and it worked.
Awesome. Thanks, Bo.
Cool. Thank you.